Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and today we gotta talk about some post-election reflection from one of the most unlikely people to ever do self-reflection, to ever show any signs of self-awareness, and that, of course, is Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And what inspired this reflection on her part is the fact that she noticed that despite the fact that she won re-election, it seemed like a significant portion of her district, which must include voters that voted for her, actually voted for the evil orange man, Donald Trump. And this caused her to ponder why somebody would vote at the top of the ticket for Trump, but then vote for her at the bottom of the ticket or at the congressional level when she sees herself as wildly different from said evil orange man. And we're going to get into this. We're going to break this down. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
As a matter of fact, let's do this right now. If you voted for Donald Trump and me, or if you voted for Donald Trump and voted Democratic down ballot, I would really love to hear from you. This is not a place of judgment. I'm not gonna put your stuff on blast or anything like that or dunk on it. That's genuinely not the intent here. I actually want to learn from you. I want to hear what you were thinking. And I just want to hear from you. So if you did that, I don't even know if anybody like that is even watching this right now. But if you are, please fill out our little Q&A here and just tell me what your thought process was.
So right off the top, I want to give Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez some credit for at least being curious about this, for at least asking the question. I know there's a lot of internet memes that say that she's pregnant right now. I'm not going to speculate on that, but some people are saying that because of that fact, she is now all of a sudden MAGA curious. But the fact of the matter is, I think she's just disturbed by this because this is not something that she would have seen coming. However, I do want to provide a more adequate explanation than anything she got from any of these particular voters, because already she's going off a very biased sample size, as in people who follow her on Instagram who are going to be more politically engaged than the average voter in her particular district. I'm going to unveil the mystery right now at the beginning so we can get into the more hilarious portions of this particular Instagram live thing, and that is, of course, they voted for Donald Trump because they wanted change at the presidential level. They were concerned about the economy, inflation, illegal migrants, flooding New York City, all the various reasons why people voted for Trump in the race people were paying the most attention to, and in the race that they were paying the least attention to, they voted for the name that they recognized. This is the most obvious answer, it is the simplest answer, and it is the true answer. So all of that soul searching and confusion and all of that, to me, doesn't really mean all that much.
All right, everyone. People are really interested in the Q&As, so I would like to ask a couple more questions. Again, if you are a Trump voter, this is not a place of judgment. I'm not here to put your stuff on blast. I genuinely want to know. So here's my next question. If you are a Trump voter, or if you were a Trump Dem split voter, I would like to know where you get your news from, how you got your information about the election. If it was social media, what social media platforms did you see political content on the most? Or who did you follow? What accounts and what people do you follow? Or if it's newspapers, what newspapers do you watch, TV, etc.? Would love to know if you could indulge me. Thank you.
Now, there were people who were saying, and again, these are of the bias sample, the people who are more politically engaged, the people who are more likely to respond to an Ocasio-Cortez post, that they voted for Trump because he's anti-establishment and they feel like Ocasio-Cortez is also anti-establishment. So there's some reputational things right there, but to make things 100% clear, the number one issues that they had at the top of the ticket took precedent, and most people voted for their normal party or what they recognized, a name that they recognized, recognized, and that was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Who even was her opponent, and did they have any pull in that particular district? I don't think anybody knows. I don't even know, and I did all the research to look into this story, and I still have no clue who is opposing her. So yeah, that's the simple answer. That's the most important answer. However, what I do want to talk about, now that I've solved that great mystery for you guys, is this post at the end of this, where they asked her a question about whether or not Democratic wokeness cost them the election.
Okay, so now that we've done all of that, and I've asked you all a lot of questions, I think it's only fair for me to say, do you have any questions for me? And I will continue to post some of the answers to some of the Q&As that you all posted. But I also wanted to create an opportunity now that we've shared a lot. Is there something that I can share with you that you're curious or interested in about?
So the question asked by a member of her audience to Ocasio-Cortez is whether or not they believe that wokeness and all these different things that Democrats do to annoy people is what drove people out to support Trump. And the example that they specifically give is LatinX.
Personally, I don't. I think that a lot of voters really don't like fake people, and they're sick and tired of fake politicians. And so what I actually think is worse is saying something you don't believe. And so if during the entire time in campaign season, you're saying that you're down with trans people or like the LGBT community, and then you lose an election, and then the next day you say all that stuff was wrong, I actually think what people are more upset about is someone was doing something they didn't believe and just saying something.
So Ocasio-Cortez responds to this particular question about whether or not the wokeness, the LatinX nonsense was the thing that drove people away from the Democratic Party. And she says, no, what I actually think is going down is that people don't like fakeness. They don't like all these different various people who say certain things like they're down with the gays and down with the transes up until election day. And then after they lose, they end up churning on those very same groups of people. Now, I will also point out, because this is going around and I have verified this for myself, that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who doesn't believe that the wokeness is what cost her this election, recently removed the she/her pronouns from her bio. So she hates the fact that people get all up in the LGBT XXIIP community's business and say that they support them and they love them and all of that, and they virtue signal for them, but then after election day, they then change it up when Ocasio-Cortez appears to have done that very same thing. And by the way, yes, this is definitely a major issue. This is something that annoys people. It doesn't outrank the economy or anything like that. But the fact of the matter is, when you're distracted with this complete and utter nonsense, when you don't even present yourself as a party that has common sense, that has downstream effects on other issues. A lot of people say the culture war is how the elites distract us from the economic issues. This is a favorite talking point on the left. All these dorks that say Bernie would have won are bringing this up constantly, but the fact of the matter is, the issues of your everyday lives, the fact that people are trying to police you, change up the culture, does have a major impact. The reason people focus on this stuff is because it works. You can talk about GDP, inflation numbers, the price of milk all you want, but if people like Ocasio-Cortez are trying to tell you that your 5-year-old in kindergarten can choose their own sex and then enforce that into law, that is going to turn off a lot of parents. I mean, there's a reason why single, unmarried women ended up voting overwhelmingly for the Democratic Party, because these are the people that are largely in favor of these policies because they don't have any skin in the game. When married women, women with children, were more likely to vote Republican because they don't want their kids being transited by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And the same thing has to do with the language policing, which, by the way, Ocasio-Cortez is going to get into, but then I'm going to show you something that is going to give you the bit of a hint that maybe she's a bit disingenuous in this regard.
Like, if you actually weren't about that life, why did you campaign as though you were? That, I think, is the actual core issue of the problem.
Now, she says the major issue is the fact that these people weren't actually about that life. They weren't actually about the transes or the gays, but they campaign like that, and that's what she thinks really bothers them. Now, I will point out that this is obviously not the case, because you're talking about losing an election because people after the election ended up throwing issues that they promoted during the election season under the bus, which is ridiculous and absurd. Obviously, you have a kind of bad loop right there, or bad chain of events, bad causality, but that's what we need to expect. But the crucial thing that she says comes next.
Now, I will say, as I've said yesterday in my stories, that I do think that there are some things that the left and that an activist left can do to ensure that they remain committed and disciplined, that we remain committed and disciplined to growing a mass movement. And there are pockets of the left that are sometimes the most amplified online that are built on a policing structure and culture. And those elements can drive people away, put them off, etc. I think we saw a lot of that this year. How much is genuine and how much isn't genuine, I think is a legitimate question. But, that's different than fighting for people.
Ocasio-Cortez says, look, we hate the fake people that say they're down with the gays and down with the transes up until election day, up until that goes south for them, that automatically end up turning their back on those very same people. But then she goes to say, listen, there are elements of the activist left that just want to police you. They want to police your language, and that is the people that are churning people away from the Democratic Party. And she thinks that there's a difference between policing people's language and actually fighting for those groups of people. Now, I just want to point out for everyone out there in the audience that the example specifically given to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was the LatinX example. And Ocasio-Cortez is saying, look, these people that just try to police your language, that end up churning everybody off, doing things like this, they actually hurt the party. And what I find absolutely hilarious about this is that Ocasio-Cortez is that very same person. Right now, what you're witnessing is her trying to pull a Homer Simpson and walking back into the bush and pretend that nobody's looking, because not only has Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez done this very same thing on a bunch of different language issues, tone police and all that, but she's specifically done this based on the LatinX thing. And in fact, she's gone even further than that, advocating for more ridiculous terms and ridiculous ways to destroy the Spanish language. And if you don't believe me, all we have to do is turn to her very same Instagram for proof of this.
I wanted to have a note on gender inclusivity in Spanish language. People sometimes like to make a lot of drama over the term LatinX. But even before LatinX, people were trying to do this, like, use an at to have the A and the O together. Gender is fluid, language is fluid, and I think people right now are using the E term as gender neutral in order to be as inclusive as possible. Don't have to make drama over it.
So let me just make something 100% clear for everybody out there in the audience, those of you in the back, and honestly, everybody in the entire world. Nobody, and I mean absolutely no one who is a normal person, who is not a woke activist, who is not a psychopath, is using Latin at, they're not using the X thing, and they're not using the E at the end. This is something that Ocasio-Cortez and her Democratic Socialist buddies have cooked up together, and they're talking about this because they live in a woke bubble that is separating from all rational, normal people. You think people coming over the border are deciding whether or not they want to do Latin at or Latin E or Latin X? No, absolutely not. Those people are from the actual places where they speak Spanish and they understand how the Spanish language works. This is a woke leftist gender ideology run amok that thinks that the Spanish language is dirty, filthy, and disgusting because it's a gendered language, and they are trying to impose that correction top down on these people. Anybody who uses this stuff, just like anyone who has pronouns in their bio, is a left-wing activist. Period. Full stop. There is no other explanation for that.
I also have a mini rant about this because there are some politicians, including Democratic politicians, that rail against the term Latinx. and they're like, this is so bad. This is so bad for the party, like blah, blah, blah.
Again, the reason I'm bringing this up is because while people will give Ocasio-Cortez credit and say, oh, she removed her pronouns and she called out the over-policing of language in the Democratic Party, the fact is she's not acknowledging that that was her specifically. Again, right here, she's calling out not only normal people, not only Latinos who hate the term LatinX.
And like, it's almost as though it has not struck some of these folks that another person's identity is not about your reelection prospects. Like, this is not about you.
But she's calling out Democrats, and look at her face throughout the whole course of this video. Look at her expressions. It's all dramatic. It's all like, huh, you stupid plebs, you stupid ignoramuses. Why don't you just be as good a person as me as I morally police you based on these ridiculous terms that a bunch of academics made up that I'm trying to enforce on the broader population? Again, all the smugness, everything people hate about leftists, all the racial politics, the gender politics, the sexual orientation politics are all present right here from Ocasio-Cortez, and this is just a couple of years ago. But suddenly, after she lost an election, all of a sudden, policing language and enforcing these ridiculous things, example, the LatinX thing, is all of a sudden big issue for Ocasio-Cortez. It's something that she doesn't like. And remember, what she especially doesn't like is those fake politicians who push this stuff up until election day, and then after election day, they churn it around and they say, okay, I'm not in favor of that actually. That's dumb. You dumb idiots. Stop saying that stuff.
Second of all, if putting a little X on your campaign literature is what you think is the difference between winning or losing an election, you need to talk about healthcare more. You need to raise people's wages. You need to talk about more issues that also matter to people.
So then we have the next thing that the smug leftist, the smug Democrat ends up doing when you bring up these issues, when you say, hey, I don't like what you're doing, you're policing a language of an entire culture, and they say, oh, that's not important, you need to talk about these important issues. But again, how can you be trusted on healthcare if you don't even know that Latino is already gender neutral, if you don't even realize how smug you're being related to this language? Again, if you show such disregard for a certain group of people that you're willing to say, no, your language is bad, dirty, and disgusting, I need to correct it, add an @ sign at the end of it for whatever reason, because that makes perfect sense, then you can't be trusted on healthcare. You can't be trusted on the economy, in my opinion. Again, I will never vote for, ever in my entire life, any politician, regardless of party, that abbreviates or alters the Spanish language in that way in order to placate a small minority of people, which are woke activists, not even the transes are all on board with this stupid ass term, just so they could seem virtuous. Nope, not interested in it, not interested in you, and I hope that a lot of people feel the same way.
That being said, why are people opting for trying to use Latinx over Latinx? Well, Latinx can be convenient in written form because you just put down an X and people can kind of mentally put in whatever vowel they identify with. But it's kind of hard to say. So Latine, you avoid the masculine O, you avoid the feminine A. Latine, E, is a little more neutral, so it can be more inclusive to people. For example, saying nosotres.
Again, this is the nonsense that Ocasio-Cortez was focused on 2 years ago when you guys were worried about inflation, when you guys were worried about the border, when the Biden administration and the Democratic Party were denying either of those things were an issue. Remember, inflation was supposed to be transitory, and there is no crisis at the border, but you have Ocasio-Cortez talking about how in written form you can put this, and how, oh, when you speak, you could do this, and here's other stupid-ass ways that we try to change the language that nobody uses as well.
That being said, if you don't want to use it, no one's forcing you to. But for people who enjoy trying to figure out language and have it meet the modern age, that's kind of where it's at.
And then Ocasio-Cortez wraps her smug rant by saying, well, nobody's forcing you to do it, but if you enjoy actual language and, being in the modern age and not being a racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe, then that's where we are right now. But, we're not pressuring you to do this. I'm also going to call you out for pointing out that Latinos don't even use this, but, this is the modern progressive moral position, and you're an immoral pig if you actually want to speak your language the way that it's supposed to be spoken. If you don't let professors in the United States of America correct your language, then honestly, you're disgusting and you're basically killing people. You're basically like committing a literal genocide. This is the absurdity that Ocasio-Cortez is presenting, and now all of a sudden, a couple years later, she's like, you know, there's too much policing going on in terms of language. I don't buy it at all. We can see what you're doing. You ended up exposing yourself, and I hope nobody falls for this. So while I do commend her for at least trying to get the attention of people who voted in a way that she couldn't possibly understand, the fact of the matter is she is the chief reason, or one of the chief reasons behind this political correct movement. She is a part of it. And by the way, the organization Justice Democrats is a perfect example of this. Founded by Cenk Uygur and Kyle Kulinski, they ended up firing both Cenk Uygur, and then Kyle Kulinski resigned in response to that due to the fact that Cenk had some old posts that they didn't like. Then they converted Justice Democrats from the more Bernie Sanders focused economic agenda, you know, the socialist nonsense, to this woke nonsense. So that's exactly what they do, and she hasn't called anybody out over there. So that's exactly the direction the party is going, and Ocasio-Cortez has followed them down that rabbit hole, down that road to nowhere, make no mistake about it. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. If you like the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Ocasio-Cortez apparently coming to the light, but in reality proving how much of a liar she is. Till next time.